welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Landry, and I started a new series on my channel where each and every week I talk all things best medicine. If you're not for sure what best medicine is, it is a new Fox TV American adaptation / spinoff show from a beloved British TV series called Doc Martin that was on the air for 18 years, and then in 2022 they decided to come to a close. I did not come across Doc Martin until 2024, so I was very late to the game, but whenever I did come across it and started watching it, I immediately became a huge fan and fell in love immediately, and since then I've seen the series through 3 times, and my parents got me the full series DVD set for my birthday that year whenever I became a huge fan. So, I wanted to start a series on my channel where I talk all things best medicine as a best medicine fan and a Doc Martin fan each and every week when I begin watching the show. And we are now to episode 9. It's crazy. There's only 4 episodes left after this, and I am just soaking it in. The good news is, there's a lot of good news in this video. The good news is there is been official news that they have renewed Best Medicine for Season 2, which is so exciting. That means we're going to get to see more of Dr. Best and the town of Port Wynne, which I'm very excited about. And that means that I will get to make more future reaction videos for you guys, which I'm very excited. I love making these videos every week. I get excited every time I get to sit down and film this and talk with you guys. But with that being said, let's dig into episode 9. The Doc Martin episode is what it was titled this week, which has a very special meaning. We'll get into that in a minute. But if you have not seen Best Medicine yet, or have not seen the recent episode, you may not want to watch this video until you go back and watch, because I will be spoiling a lot of things. We dig really deep into each and every episode. And if you are new to my series and you're curious about Best Medicine previous episodes, I have a playlist in my channel on my channel where I have put all of those reaction videos together. So please go check that out if you haven't already. But with that being said, if you've seen the recent episode of Best Medicine and you're curious what my thoughts are, come on, let's talk about it. First of all, I don't know if you realize it or not, but each week Port Wynne has a certain theme to their episode. This week's theme was Pajama Day / sleep in at the school. So I thought I would take it upon myself and join in with that theme. So I got my little outfit out. This is kind of what I wear around the house on a chill day. So I'm in my Port Wynne pajama party outfit for today. And I'm going to take a picture and put it in the beginning of the video so you can see my full outfit, because all you can see is my robe and my shirt. But yeah, we're in the theme for this week's episode because I'm really excited about talking about the episode. So before I get too carried away, I think we need to do a little recap of last week's episode, because last week's episode had a lot of developments in characters. So if you don't remember, last week's episode was the Bog Man episode, or it was called the Bog Father, where it was Port Wynne Day, where they Port Wynne Historian Day or something like that, where they do a reenactment in the bog, and it was George, Bert, and Sheriff Mark reenacting the play for the school children and Louisa, and Sheriff Mark ends up finding a body in the bog, which then leads into a huge investigation. We see a shift in the mood of the character Dr. Martin Best. He seems to be more happy, not as grumpy as he usually is, and it turns out it's because he gets to perform the autopsy of this bog man, and it makes him realize how much he misses surgery and that he is able to do what he loves because it doesn't involve blood. We later learn that the bog man is his relative, which he did not give consent to send in DNA samples, but Elaine ends up sending hair samples, and he finds out he is related to this bog man, which immediately his mood changes drastically. He's kind of sad again because the town is heckling him, calling him the bog man, and he ends up going to Louisa because beginning of, or in the middle of the episode, he kind of blows up on Louisa, kind of goes off on her, and he goes back to her house at the end and apologizes to her and tells her about his blood phobia, which is a huge, huge step, because the only person that knew about his blood phobia was Elaine. And you could tell that at the beginning of the episode he's really wanting to work on that blood phobia, because he ends up buying a piece of liver. I kept calling it a piece of meat. I didn't know what it was, but I think it was a piece of liver. And he couldn't even cut that and see blood without getting nauseous. So he's really trying to work on that blood phobia. And he tells Louisa about his blood phobia. She asks him why, and he ends up telling her that he does not want to end up like the Bog Man. And then that's all we get to see, because he did not tell her how he feels about her yet. So with that being said, I think that summarizes enough for we can get into this week's episode. Season 1, Episode 9 of Best Medicine, titled Doc Martin. I was really, really excited about this episode because a very special person was cameoing in this week's episode. The original Doc Martin himself, Martin Clunes, made a cameo appearance as Martin's father, Dr. Robert Best. And when I found out in October that he agreed to be on an episode, I was very, very excited, because I loved him and Doc Martin. Not giving any spoilers. You'll have to check out Doc Martin if you are interested, but I just really enjoyed seeing him, and it was just so nice to see him back on screen. So, let's dig into episode 9. So we start out in the kitchen, and you could tell something was up with Dr. Best, because Martin was messing with the coffee pot, and he's just like fidgeting around, and then he goes to the cupboard, and then he's like staring at the cupboard, and I'm like, okay. And then he opens the cupboard, and it has a vial of blood sitting in the cupboard that he ends up putting it there because he's trying to deal with his blood phobia. He immediately opens it up. The second he sees it, he says, no, can't do it, closes the door, and goes running to the sink because he's getting nauseous. So, once again, we're seeing that he knows that this blood phobia is a problem, and he is trying his best to circum it in ways that he is in control of. And maybe later he will ask for help. Maybe he'll go to therapy. Who knows? But right now we see that he really is taking this blood phobia thing seriously. He is trying to overcome it. So after that, he gets his first patient, which is someone that has stomach problems, it looks like. They're having abdominal pains, and immediately he tells them that they need to go to the local next town's hospital, which I'm pretty sure is called Bar Harbor. I keep forgetting, but this time I wrote it down, so I hope I'm pronouncing it right. He tells him he needs to go to Bar Harbor, and immediately the patient was like, really, is that how this works? And gets in an argument with him, complaining. And he's like, well, yeah, that's who I'm referring you to. And then the guy ends up burping, and then the line that he said, because you could tell that it was probably disgusting, he says, unless you ingested fermented sewage, you need to go to Bar Harbor, meaning there's something wrong with you, buddy, you need to go, I'm telling you to go to the hospital. So, will he go to the hospital? Time will tell, but it seems like his first patient was a character. So then we go to the waiting room, and of course Elaine's back to her game show, podcast, whatever you want to call it. And today's podcast segment is called Let's Unpack This with Elaine. And she has a box with random stuff from the doctor's office in it, and she's just pulling out random things. Meanwhile, that waiting room was chaotic. I mean, noisy. We had the kid playing the bugle. Just playing it. I'm a little confused why we brought a bugle to the doctor's office, but whatever. And then you have Elaine doing her little talk show in the background. And you know, Dr. Best walks in and he's like, what is going on? Like, it was just too chaotic. And then in the midst of all this guy comes in with a rooster or chicken. I think it was a chicken. It was a chicken. And he says, sorry, Doc, I'm low. I can't pay you, so I'm going to give you this chicken. And immediately Martin's like, no, thank you. I don't want it. And he hands it to him and he walks away. And while amongst the chaos, who walks in? Martin's parents, Dr. Robert Best, and his mother, Vanessa. And immediately, he's in shock that his parents are there. They've had the kid playing the bugle. He's already told the kid to stop. He has holding a chicken, and Elaine's still doing her talk show in the background. So there's a lot going on in this scene. And immediately he's like, what are you doing here? And they both say immediately, I could ask you the same. So immediately, Vanessa looks at Robert and says, this is madness. Robert, do something. And in the midst of him in shock that his parents are here in the waiting room, you have this guy walk in and has had an accident, and he's like wanting Martin, Dr. Best, to look. And he's like, go in there, telling him to go into the examination room. And the chicken gets loose, and Martin's trying to get the chicken. And then while all of that is happening, Robert goes into the examination room and starts looking at the patient. Which then, Martin, Dr. Best, is like, where'd he go? And Vanessa says, in there, meaning the doctor's into the examination room. And he goes in there and he's like, this is my patient, I can take care of this. And Robert's like ignoring him and is already basically examining the patient. And then they kind of butt heads a little bit. Robert wants to give the guy a shot and says that all he needs is a shot to release the pain and then he'll be better. Martin, Dr. Best, wants to send him a prescription at the pharmacy for him to pick it up, and that'll take care of it. And so both of them have different opinions, and they immediately go at it. And then at the end, what cracked me up is when the patient's like, thank you, doc. They both say, it's Dr. Best. So immediately they have not got off to the right foot. They're butting heads against each other because they are annoyed. And then, that was just the first right away opening of the episode. A lot of chaoticness happening in the doctor's office, which, what's new? I'm not surprised. So now that everyone has realized that the people in the waiting room have realized that these are Martin, Dr. Best's parents, Elaine immediately starts having a conversation with Vanessa, which is Martin's mother, and asks where they are staying. And she says, well, we're probably going to stay at the local, the inn, and I can't think of what it was called. And she's like, no nonsense. Why don't I make a guest bed here and you can stay here? Family time is what's important. And immediately both Martin and Vanessa are like, no, that's okay. Like, none of them want to stay with each other. But in the end, they end up staying with him. And right away, Martin notices that there is something wrong with Robert because he's like jerking his head, he has like tics, and so he immediately pulls Vanessa aside and asks her if she's noticed anything different about Robert. And she just brushes him off and is like, no, your father is fine. There's nothing out of the ordinary. What are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous. So immediately, Dr. Best, Martin is concerned about his father, but his mother seems to think that this is nothing out of the ordinary, that this is normal behavior. So I was immediately intrigued about wondering what is also wrong with Robert because of the way he was acting. And I was like, yeah, there must be something wrong. So I was curious myself what may be going on. But clearly the parents think that there's nothing wrong. And also, you have Elaine doing her thing in the waiting room, and immediately Vanessa confronts her and is like, so, do you record yourself all the time? And she's like, yeah. And Vanessa says, you may think you are cute and may think you're cute, but you're not, because she's recording. And Elaine was like, excuse me. So right away, I think Elaine is realizing that there are people that can not be a fan of you, and this is like her first time really experiencing that, because Vanessa is it seems like that's just how Martin's parents are. They are not afraid to say what they think, whether it hurts your feelings or not. And I find it interesting that Vanessa is a psychologist or philosopher, something, I can't remember. It was something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, so he has a doctor as a father and a psychologist, philosophist as a mother. Very interesting. So that might explain stuff. Meanwhile, we are at the Portland school, day school, and Louisa is in the office in a meeting with the principal, and it turns out the principal is promoting her to being the principal, which Louisa was very honored. And then it turns out he springs a lot upon her. He tells her that the school is being shut down at the end of the month, and that she's in charge of letting everyone know, and that she is in charge of writing out the emails, and basically he is just bailing on them. I think he's given up. He doesn't want to deal with it, so he's just basically left it to Louisa to pick up the pieces, which I don't know how I feel about that. I feel very bad for Louisa. I don't know what I would do in a situation like that. You know, even she's like, oh, so you're just giving up and leaving then? And he's like, yeah, pretty much. And it's like, wow, how nice of you to leave her with this. And she even brings up, well, it's the sleep-in this weekend. And he's like, yeah, you can deal with it, and be sure to tell them about the school closing. And I'm like, wow, that's what you're gonna do. And he takes his stuff and takes the chair and leaves, and there's Louisa left with all of this pressure. And note to self, you know, we found out the principal is Dum Dum from Elaine. That's what she called him because he married her mother. And once again, I see why she calls him that. I 100% agree. Like, I wasn't, when I met him and the way he was acting, I was not a fan. And I'm still not a fan, especially now that he's left Louisa to deal with this. So, yeah, I 100% agree with that nickname. He is a dum-dum. So, we have that going on. We go back to Martin, Dr. Best dealing with his parents. They're sitting at the supper table, and they're just having, not really having a conversation. They don't really seem like they're the type to have small talk, but Martin just goes ahead and asks, what are you doing here? He just lets it out. He wants to know why they're there. And they can't really give a good reason. They just say, we wanted to see why you left it all to move here. Pretty much, they don't understand why he left Boston to live there and become the small town doctor. And, you know, they're just giving him a hard time. And I like the line whenever Vanessa, his mother, is complaining that she can't even go get a hair appointment done without people asking, and it's just an embarrassment. And the fact that he says, oh, I'm sorry that it's hard on you and your hair, meaning he doesn't, they don't seem to care how he feels. It's all about them and that he's embarrassing them. Meanwhile, while they're having these conversations, you have Al in the background trying to fix the sink, which is making a lot of noise. And it was so funny because it takes it back to episode 1 whenever he's in the job interview and you had Bert and Al destroying the wedding arch, and Martin asks them if they usually conduct interviews in a construction zone. And once again, he's trying to have a conversation with his parents in his own house, and you have this, and he makes the comment, yeah, I don't know why this was the time that that my sink needed to be repaired. So clearly they are getting annoyed by Al in the background. And then meanwhile, Robert is still having those twitchy tics, and Martin immediately says, Robert, what is wrong? And he's like, well, don't be ridiculous, there's nothing wrong with me. And they clash again. Martin immediately wants to examine him to figure out what's wrong. Robert says, we're not doing that, that's nonsense. And then as Al is continuing on fixing the sink, which made a huge noise, makes Martin mad, tells him to get out, Robert ends up falling asleep just out of the blue instantly. And then Martin finally looks at Vanessa and is like, see what I'm talking about? This is not normal. And Vanessa's like, don't be ridiculous. He does that from time to time. He's an easy sleeper. And she punches him, and he immediately wakes up, and that's when they go at it again, because Martin's like, this is not normal. We need to do some tests. And Robert's like, nope, not happening. So, once again, Robert is having some interesting behaviors that may mean that he has a medical condition. So, we're back to the kitchen, and Martin it's the next morning, and we're back to the kitchen, and Martin, Dr. Best, is fixing his coffee, goes to the cupboard, and opens it, and the blood vial is still there, and he still cannot look at it without getting nauseous. You can tell he's getting frustrated, because he kind of like slams the door, and he's like, man, and he's all mad and upset with himself because he couldn't do it. He can't look at it without getting instantly nauseous. And then let's back up that also the night before, Martin ends up hearing somebody moving in the house, and it turns out Robert was getting in a car and driving off. So Robert was driving at night, immediately making Martin have concerns. So that next morning, whenever him and Robert were in town, he is doing a walk with him, which immediately Robert tells him that I usually conduct my walks myself. This is ridiculous. And Martin makes the comment, well, I thought I would walk with you so you don't manage to get lost. They're just having a little banter between each other. And Robert's like, this town is smaller than I remember. This is ridiculous. And, Martin kind of rolls his eyes, and he's like, well, I'm walking with you. And he starts talking to him, asking him what he did last night, where he went, and, he says, what do you mean? Where did I go? I, went up the stairs, took a left, and went under the duvet. Don't be ridiculous. And Martin's like, well, I saw you get in a car, where did you go? And Robert's like, I'm your father, and they just start going at each other. Meanwhile, Copernicus the dog walks up, and is starting to follow them, and Robert says, whose dog is this? Do you know this dog? And Martin's like, no, I've never seen this dog before in my life. And he said, well, they're unhygienic, and it needs to stay away from us. And Martin's like, yeah, you're right. And then Robert gets mad and storms off, and so you can tell that Dr. Best's father does not like dogs as well. Meanwhile, we go back to the doctor's office, and you have a boatload of people in the waiting room, and they're all in pajamas. And immediately, Dr. Best is like, pajama day, wow! And he's like, why? And Elaine explains to him that it's the sleep-in tonight, and that they have it every year, and they wear pajamas. And he says, I guess it's better than Naked Day. And she's like, oh, that's next month. And he looked at her, and she said, I'm just kidding. Meanwhile, she's still doing her little thing where she is unpacking things. And she has a stethoscope, and he's like, hey, I was looking for that. Takes it away from her, and it was kind of funny, because he's like, ha ha, when he took it, and he kind of went in. And then we go to the Salty Breeze, and we did not see Brisket. I don't think we saw Brisket since the Blueberry Festival, which was episode 6. So Brisket is still in town, and they have a little pet bed for her, and she's in the Salty Breeze in the front. At first I was like, whoa, wait a second, I thought the agreement was she was not allowed to be in the Salty Breeze, but I think it was the kitchen she's not allowed to be in. It's fine for her to be in the front, she just cannot be in the kitchen where they fix the food. So she has her little bed, which was so funny. And immediately Aunt Sarah storms in, and she's like, I need a drink. And immediately Greg is like, whoa, Sarah, because she is chugging that beer down. What is going on? And she says, it's my terrible brother and his witchy sister. Or, no, how did she say it? My terrible, unbearable brother and witchy sister-in-law is in town, and I haven't seen them in years. And she's like, I'm not looking forward to talking to them. And Greg is like, well, maybe they came to see you, they miss you. And she's like, seeing them and talking to them is like talking to freezer burn, or is freezer burn or something like that. I can't remember exactly how she said it, but it was just so funny, and she's just not having it. She's not looking forward to talking to them. And immediately George comes out, and he has made a grilled cheese sandwich with truffles, I'm pretty sure is what it was. And he wants them to try it, and Aunt Sarah's like, what is this? It smells like stinky feet. And he's like, how dare you? I used truffle. And they didn't want to try it. And he's like, well, he was all mad at Greg and Aunt Sarah, telling them that they were being picky. And Greg ends up explaining that George found out that his friend has recently got a Michelin star, and that he is on the hunt to get one himself. He's trying to cook these bizarre things. And George is like, and I'm thinking about having a menu like this for the sleep-in. And immediately Greg and Aunt Sarah's like, for high school teenagers? And he's like naming off these fancy things, and they say, for high school teenagers, meaning this is not a good idea whatsoever. They like junk food. And George is persistent and is insisting on doing that. And he gets mad at Greg and Aunt Sarah for not approving. And, the little banter they have is just so funny. So now we are at lunch with Aunt Sarah, Dr. Bess Martin, Robert, and Vanessa. And that was just an interesting, once again, awkward at the table, family table, because none of them have talked to each other in a very long time. And I like the Aunt Sarah bantering with Robert. She immediately says, I remember when you used to eat your boogers. And Robert, I never did that. And finally Aunt Sarah's like, let's cut to the chase. Why are you here? And immediately Vanessa is like, oh, so strong and all acting all cool. And but don't let that stop from your mistakes, like just letting her have it. Still don't know what they are referring to by Aunt Sarah's mistakes, but clearly they're not too impressed with her. And then she goes at them and says, oh, so you just come back all these years to talk to me about that? And they just start clashing, family disagreement. And finally she looks at Robert and says, why are you really here? And it turns out that Robert wants to sell the house because he's the oldest, and that it was left to him, and so he is selling it out from under Aunt Sarah. And if she wants to buy it, she can buy it. And she's like, how am I supposed to do that? With lobsters? And he's like, if that's what you intend to, or something like that. And I was like, oh wow. And then she's like, I know you had it hard, but we're family. I can't believe you. And immediately he gets upset and he's like, don't you bring up that, meaning the Rosemary accident. But he won't, none of them will say Rosemary, just Martin and Aunt Sarah, because they both said, don't you bring up that. You know that's not what this is about. And she says, you mean her? And he just says, come on Vanessa, we're leaving. And they storm out. And immediately Aunt Sarah is just in shock. She's getting her house taken away from her by him, it sounds like. And I thought it was sweet that Dr. Bess Martin told her that they could chip in, and that he could help her pay for it, and that they could get enough money to buy the house so that she could stay in it. But that family doesn't really take charity. Immediately Aunt Sarah says, I'm not taking charity from my nephew, and tells him to get out too. So that we find out the real reason why Robert, Best, and Vanessa have come to town. It's because they want to sell the house. Well, as Martin, Dr. Best, is walking back to his house, he immediately comes across an accident scene, and it turns out that his father, Robert, had crashed his car into a bush, ran it off the road. And immediately Sheriff Mark is talking to them, and then Martin immediately goes and is like, what has happened? What just happened? And Robert's like brushing it off, saying that he saw a squirrel, he didn't want to hit it, so he swerved. And Martin doesn't buy it. He's like, since when do you care about squirrels? Which is the truth. He just called a dog unhygienic. He doesn't seem like the type of person that cares about animals. So I'm like, okay, I'm with him. Why did you swerve off the road? And immediately Sheriff Mark realizes that these are his parents, and he tells them that he is Martin's best bud. And what cracked me up is what Vanessa, his mother, says. She said, you don't seem like a very intelligent person that would be hanging out with my son. And he takes that as a joke, and he's like, nice one, Mrs. B. And, Martin's shaking his head like, she's not joking, she's serious. But, how Sheriff Mark is, it just goes past his head. He doesn't get that it's not a joke. And he tells Robert that his insurance is expired, and immediately Dr. Best is like, have you forgotten, what did you do, forget to pay? You do your payment? And then even Vanessa's like, Robert! And he's like, okay, we're done here, there's been a mistake. And he's like, let's go. And then immediately you can tell that there is more to this story. And that's when Martin, Dr. Best, insists on giving Robert an examination. So he's trying to do cognitive tests, it looks like, because he asks him to draw a clock to show the time. And Robert's like, this is ridiculous. This is a waste of time. I'm your father. And Martin's like, well, there's something wrong because you are forgetting things, you have these tics, and you fall asleep too easily. And he immediately tells Martin not to tell his mother that he is on a new medication, and that this new medication causes him not to be able to sleep, and because he's not able to sleep, he goes off driving in the middle of the night, and that she is not to be told that this is his little secret. And Martin wants to know what the drug is called, obviously. And Robert can't recall what it's called, so immediately Martin's like, well, is it in your bag? Let me go look at it for myself. And Robert's like, well, I just took the last one this morning, threw it away. You won't be able to find it. And Martin's like, okay, so if this is a drug you need medicine you need every single day, then what pharmacy are you going to go get it picked up at? Robert was reluctant, and he finally says, Sally's. We are done here, and he storms out. So, clearly Robert is hiding more from Martin than what he is letting on. As Robert storms out of the room, he tells Vanessa, come on, let's go. And the stomach guy comes back in the doctor's office and is like, I'm dying, I'm in pain. And Martin's like, I told you to go to Bar Harbor. And he's like, well, I don't want to, I'm in pain. And immediately Robert's like, I'm a doctor. He's a gastrologist, whatever it's called. I'll pop it up on the screen. I'm not good with pronunciations. And Martin's like, no, he needs a specialist. I told him to go to Bar Harbor. And the guy's like, he's the gas man. Let me see him. And Martin's not having it. And then the guy ends up coughing, and he spits up a hairball, and immediately we realize that this guy has a condition where he eats hair. And it was so funny how Martin and Robert were like, because Elaine's like, what is wrong with him? And they were like, he has, and they're talking over each other, and Martin's like, no, take it away, like, you stole the spotlight, you tell him what it is. And turns out that this guy ends up eating hair, which is a huge problem, and is sent to the hospital. So there's the mystery about the stomach guy. Meanwhile, Vanessa confronts Elaine again and asks her if she really thinks that posting videos like this is what she wants to do with her life, that she could do anything in the world, she's so smart and she could do any kind of art in the world, but she is wanting to do that and put garbage out to the world, asking her if she wants to be a garbage person. And immediately Elaine doesn't know how to react to that, because once again, as I said earlier, it looks like Elaine's never dealt with people not agreeing with what she does and giving hate comments to her. So immediately Martin sees what's going on and he's like, Vanessa, stop. That's enough. And Elaine's like, no, Doc, it's okay. I have skin of a rhinoceros, thick skin. And she clearly did get affected, because you can tell that her mood kind of changes because she was talked to this way. And in a way, I kind of felt bad for Elaine, because sometimes the things that people say can really hurt your feelings and get to you. But unfortunately, that's how it is in this world. If people have an opinion, they're not afraid to say things. So we'll see how this affects Elaine. So finally, Martin goes to the pharmacy to see Sally Milo, to see if Robert's prescription could be picked up. And immediately Sally starts flirting with him. You know how Sally is, and she's like, he asks her if his father's medicine is ready to be picked up, and she tells him that he never had a prescription filled, and he says, are you sure? And she says, speaking of your father, you two look just alike. And he's like, can we not do this today? And because she's starting to flirt with him, and she's like, well, fine, okay. And he then immediately realizes, how does she know what his father looks like if he didn't come in? So he starts asking questions, and it turns out he bought minutes for his flip phone, meaning he has a burner phone, and even Sally says, Daddy's got a burner phone. And so Martin immediately storms out. So clearly there is a lot of things Robert is hiding that may not be medical related after all. We are now at the Portland Day School, where we are having our sleep in, and everyone is there to prepare for it and get things ready, all the adults. And you could tell that it was really affecting them, because everyone was doing some deja vu, reminiscing about memories. You know, Elaine sees her picture of her when she was in the senior play, and immediately she asks Al if he thinks that what she does is garbage. Is she putting garbage out to the world? And immediately Al's like, no, not at all. Why would you say that? And, he's trying to comfort her. We find out that Al was the smartest kid in his class, and that he had perfect SAT scores. And he doesn't think he was very smart, but even Louisa says, that those SAT scores are good for 5 years. Trying to encourage him to maybe use those. Then you have Mark reminiscing about school in general, and he makes the comment about how he misses everything. He misses the school song, but what he doesn't miss is that maybe him and Louisa shouldn't got back together, and that maybe they shouldn't have been together for those 8 years, because now that they are not together anymore, why does it matter? That everything's ending, and that why should they have memories like that? It didn't really matter to him. Which immediately Louisa's like, wait, no, don't say that. So clearly Mark is really thinking about the past, and in their relationship. And then you have Aunt Sarah looking at this picture in the trophy glass, And, Geneva, her friend, comes up to her and says, "Are you still beating yourself up over that, honey?" And is comforting her, which I have questions. I was like, okay, why is this picture significant? So, meanwhile, back at Martin's house, Robert and Vanessa are going out for some food because Robert's like, apparently you don't eat. All you have in this fridge is blueberries and ketchup. So clearly it doesn't seem like Martin cooks very much. And so they go out, and as they go out, that gives Martin a perfect opportunity to go through his father's belongings to see what he can find. And what does he find? He finds a burner phone, and Robert has been calling somebody named Francesca a very lot. So what does Martin do? Dr. Best, he picks up the phone and dials that number, and he calls. She picks up the phone, answers, and says, "Robert, I've been waiting to hear from you." And Martin's like, "No, this is Dr. Martin Best, Robert's son. Who is this?" And she immediately hangs up the phone. So looks like Robert may be having an affair or something going on there, because who is this Francesca? That is a question we all want to know. So Martin immediately confronts Robert, and he's kind of fidgety, and Robert's making it known, it's like, "Well, you've never really grown out of being fidgety, have you?" And he's like, "Well, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest with me." And Robert's like, "Okay." Martin's like, "Who is Francesca? Are you having an affair?" And Robert's immediately like, "No, I'm not having an affair. What are you doing going through my stuff? That's an insult. I'm your father." And says, "And you're getting me confused with your Aunt Sarah." And immediately Martin's like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And, Robert being Robert, he's like, "We're done here. Vanessa, we're leaving." So immediately his mom, Vanessa's like, "What have you done, Martin?" Like, blaming it all on him. She has no clue what's going on whatsoever. So it looks like Robert and Vanessa are leaving, and we are back to the day school sleep in. It's the sleep in time. All the high schoolers are ramped up. Meanwhile, when everybody is coming into the school, they are handing out coffee espresso shots like it's candy, trying to get everyone riled up so that they can stay up all night, which is probably not a good idea for kids getting sugar. And the high schoolers are not really a fan of George's cuisine that he is serving them. They're like, "What is this nasty food?" and is throwing it, and he immediately like, "Nasty food? I'll show you." And Greg's like, now, George, calm down. And it turns out Greg had snuck in some junk food snacks for them, knowing that they were not going to like the meal that George was preparing for them. And so Greg is handing him the snacks and is like, "It's our little secret, don't tell." And immediately George catches him, and he's like going off on Greg, like, "How could you do this to me, you traitor?" Which was so funny. And so, yeah, I was not surprised that the high schoolers were not going to be a fan of George's cuisine. We also see that everyone is hyped up on the coffee and sugar, running around like it's nothing. And immediately Greg and Geneva are like, "Okay, maybe this is too much sugar," which, yeah, even Sheriff Mark was hyped up. So then it was time for them to play their game called Find the Mosquito, where apparently they had this mosquito, which is their mascot, around the school, and whoever finds the mosquito becomes the winner, and the person that will be in charge of hiding it for the next sleep-in. Which leads to Louisa trying to tell everyone that this is going to be the last sleep-in, that the school is going to be shut down. But kids being kids cut her off and is like, "What are we waiting for? Let's go find this mosquito." So immediately, she doesn't get to tell everyone that the school is being shut down, and they go do the hide and seek for the mosquito search. And immediately, Sheriff Mark, he's basically a kid, an adult kid. He's like, I'm going to go find it. And Louisa's like, wait a second, Mark, this is for the children. And he's like, well, not if I find it first. So he is on a mission to go find it. So she goes with him and starts chasing him. And he goes down to the basement. And she's like, wait a second, Mark, they wouldn't hide it down here. It's too dark and too spooky. And he's like, that's the whole point. Nobody will look down here. So he goes down into the basement. He goes into this room. You hear something. Something clearly isn't right. Louisa turns on the light. And immediately Mark has been impaled by a wire. Which, ouch! It's through him. Through his stomach. Like, ugh. I was like, oh boy. So immediately we have a situation. So Dr. Best comes to the accident scene. And Mark is in very, very big shock. He's just talking up a storm, talking about everything under the shining sun, saying, have you tried George's food? What kind of food was that? It wasn't any good. Just talking away because he's just in shock. He doesn't really know what's going on. And even Dr. Best is like, you're in shock, Mark. You have a serious condition. You have a serious thing. And immediately Aunt Sarah's like, wait, what's going on? Like, talk to me, because Dr. Best is like, Martin's like, where's the ambulance? And there had been an accident somewhere else in town, so the ambulance couldn't get there right away. And Aunt Sarah tells him that, and he's like immediately concerned and panicked. And Aunt Sarah's like, what is going on? And he's like, well, he may be dealing with some abdominal bleeding, hemorrhaging because of the situation. And Mark is like, abdominal situation, like he's laughing about it, like he's in shock. And Aunt Sarah's like, well, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think we need your father. So immediately they call Robert to come assist him. And immediately Robert and Martin do not see eye to eye. Robert wants to perform a surgery there where he takes procedure there where he removes the wire from Mark's body so that he can immediately go to the hospital and be taken care of. Martin wants to cut the wire, leave it in him, and transport him that way. Which immediately Robert's like, that is an idiot. Only an idiot would want to do that. What are you even talking about? And Martin's like, well, I found that would be better because he's going to end up hemorrhaging out and there's going to be blood everywhere. And Robert's like, well, of course there's going to be blood. Doctor, why are you worried about a little bit of blood? Clearly, this blood phobia thing is affecting Martin. Worser now. And while all this is going on, Mark is asking for his mom. So Aunt Sarah goes to get, Sally Milo, his mom, and Sally goes in there, and this is what's so funny. Sally goes in there, has a look on her face because of what she's seeing. She's like, Mark, honey bear, everything's fine. Everything's going to be okay. Soothes him. He's like all calm. And then she walks out. I'm like, she's gonna end up passing out. She's gonna pass out. She screams to the top of her lungs and passes out. And immediately what cracked me up is what Robert said. He goes, geez, is anybody in this town normal? I thought that was so funny. I was like, welcome to Portland. No, that's not the case whatsoever for you. So Robert is now trying to perform this procedure, and immediately Sheriff Mark is obviously out of shock, and he tells Robert that if he can get his liver out in one piece and not damage it, that he will waiver the speeding ticket, which immediately throws up a red flag because nobody knows that he's got a speeding ticket. And even Dr. Best is like, Martin's like, speeding ticket? What speeding ticket? And Robert's like, don't be ridiculous. He's delusional right now. Even Vanessa's like, Robert, you got some explaining to do. So turns out Robert does not have a medical condition. He lied about taking medicine. Turns out that Robert has been driving the car out at night gambling. The Francesca woman is his person that takes bets, his booker, or bookie, whatever you call him. And that he gambled everything away. That's why he wanted to sell Aunt Sarah's house. He's lost everything. He lied to his wife Vanessa, telling her that Francesca was selling life insurance. Not the case whatsoever. So Robert has a big gambling problem, and everybody has found out about it now. And Elaine's like, talk about needing to unpack, because the whole town is hearing this dispute. And Sheriff Mark's like, is this the time or place to talk about this? I'm really in pain. And, Martin is very concerned, is like trying to calm him down. Meanwhile, you have Robert that really doesn't care about how you feel whatsoever. Doesn't have good bedside manner. Martin doesn't really have good bedside manner either, but put the two together, and Martin is a little bit more caring and compassionate than Robert is. And so, immediately Vanessa storms out because she cannot believe what she just heard, and they start doing the procedure. Robert's telling Mark to grow up, man, suck it up and be quiet, he can't concentrate. Martin tells Robert that's not how you talk to a patient, he's a human being too. And I think Louisa's really seeing that Martin has a caring side of him, because she kind of looks at him and smiles. I think she realizes, hey, now I see why you are the way you are. Your parents are wild, pretty much. And so immediately Dr. Best is like, we need something to keep Mark's mind off of this while we do this. So Louisa's like, I think I know what might. And she starts singing the Portland Students' Day School chant, which then gets his mind off of it, and the whole entire town that's in the basement is singing along too, which brought another thing that brings the community together. This is a tight-knit community, everybody's there for one another, and they're just singing the song, and Martin's like, brilliant. He's really impressed that Louisa came up with this idea, and he really likes it. So they start singing. Robert and Dr. Best Martin are able to get the wire out of Mark, and immediately he is bleeding. Elaine's holding the pressure, and she's like, there's a lot of blood. Martin's like, yes, there is. And he immediately storms out. He just starts running out, leaving Robert, his father, and Elaine to tend to Mark, which then leads to Louisa running out too, chasing after Martin. So Louisa finds Martin in the closet, and she's like, hey, Martin, it's okay. Calm down. It'll be alright. And he's like, he's like, I can't, the blood. And she's like, we really need to get this blood thing under control. And he's like, I know, I've been trying to practice myself, putting blood vials throughout the house, trying to get myself exposed to it. And she's like, ooh. And he's like, yeah, it's not working. And she's like, well, what can I do? And he's like, well, stay here with me. And so I thought that was really sweet. You're really seeing a moment between the two of them. And she's trying to comfort him, and then you can tell that she's sad, and he's like, what's wrong? And she tells him about she doesn't want to be happy. She's been trying to put on a happy face all night long. She's not happy because this is the last sleep-in. The school's going to get shut down. She's been put in charge. And they're just having a conversation, connecting with one another. And for once, Martin didn't say anything dumb. He's just listening to her. And then, as they're having that moment, you hear banging on the door, and there's the high schoolers outside, and they're chanting, kiss, 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 kiss. And it turns out that that's the 7 minutes in heaven closet, where if you're locked in there, you're making out. That's the only way you can get out. And immediately Martin and Louisa are like, let us out, let us out. And then Liam, one of the teenagers, comes running and says, the paramedics are here, and they're very hot. So the teenagers run to go see that. And then Louisa, yeah, paramedics, EMTs, yeah, I better go see for myself. And immediately Martin's like, well, okay, fair enough, thank you. And so there was that. Still didn't get to see. I thought maybe there would be another kiss, but still no. But at least they still got to have that moment. Meanwhile, you have Vanessa blowing off steam, beating up a piñata, and immediately Louisa sees that and confronts Vanessa and starts talking to her. And Vanessa is not wanting to talk to her whatsoever. She's like, I don't need your pity. You know how Vanessa is. But Louisa kind of has like a heart-to-heart kind of empathy for her. She's like, I don't know what's going on, but I know what it's like to have your life kind of put out in the open for people to see and judge, but it will pass, meaning she understands because of the mark in her relationship, the broken off engagement. Vanessa's like, I can't believe this, my profession, how ironic, and I couldn't even see that there was something wrong going on with my own husband, and that everybody is going to make fun of me for that. It's going to be a laughing stock. Louisa's just trying to comfort her. And, immediately Vanessa's like, you are a genuinely kind person, and there's not many people like that in this world. Giving Louisa a compliment, which is not very common for Martin's family, it sounds like. And she's like, I think you are a keeper, and he will be foolish not to keep you. And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I know that you and my son are in love, and I think that that is good, but good luck. The best men are difficult, which I thought was so funny. She's like, take it from me, after dealing with Robert, it's gonna be hard, but good luck. You're gonna need it. So we had that. Then you have Martin confronts Aunt Sarah and wants to know, hey, what happened? Why was I not allowed to stay with you anymore? And it turns out that Aunt Sarah had an affair with the principal. That was who was in that picture. But the principal was married at the time. And that Martin's parents found out that she was having the affair. Robert told her that either she doesn't have an affair and she can still see Martin, or she continues to have the affair and she will never see Martin ever again. And turns out she chose to be with the principal over Martin, and she says, I really regret that decision because the wife found out and he moved away with her, and a loss was a loss because she not only lost Martin in that, but she lost someone she loved. And immediately Martin has a smile on his face, and she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, he was relieved. He's like, oh, I thought maybe you were tired of me, and that's why I was never allowed to come back. And she's like, no, why would you think that? And he's like, well, not everyone thinks of me as a cup of tea, meaning he realizes that not everyone likes him. And she's like, no. And she's like, I owe you an apology. And he's like, you don't owe me you didn't do anything wrong. So they make up, and of course, she goes to hug him, and he's like, now, I don't know about this. And she's like, I'm not going to squeeze you to death. I'm just giving you a hug. And he's like, that's debatable. So, Martin doesn't really like to be hugged. So, now we know the true reason why Aunt Sarah and Martin were not able to see one another after the incident where his parents took him away. You also see that Mark and Louisa are talking. Louisa checks on Mark as he's getting loaded up in the ambulance, and she asks him how he is. And he's like, well, I almost nearly died by being impaled by a wire, and as I'm nearly dying, I realized that I was going to be mad at someone that really knows me, and I didn't want to be mad at you forever, so therefore I think that it's time for me to move on. And immediately Louisa's like, wait, Mark. And then Martin walks up, and he's like thanking Martin, telling him he's a hero. And immediately Martin, Martin being Martin, but he immediately says, you're welcome. And so we have that, and so it looks like Mark is finally truly moving on from Louisa. And you have Greg trying George's food and is telling him that it was actually really good. He doesn't know what the teenagers are missing. And George is like, yeah, well, maybe I was a little carried away trying to get a Michelin star. And Greg was like, no, not really, but And so they start getting into a pillow fight because Greg agrees with George. And as the pillow fight's going on, Robert and Vanessa are leaving. And Dr. Best goes up to Robert and is like, so, where's Vanessa? And Robert's like, she's probably in there plotting her revenge. She's never going to forgive me. And Martin wants to talk about Rosemary, why they never brought it up, why they aren't talking about it anymore. And Robert's like, I'm not going to talk about it. And Martin's like, yeah, right, the past is in the past, right? And Robert's like, don't you start too. And he's like, well, I don't remember her that well. I want to talk about it. And he's like, I'm not talking about it. And he's like, her, you mean her. And Robert's like, I'm not doing this. And they immediately leave. And Vanessa's like, sorry, Martin, goodbye. And we see at the closing that on the memory tree, Martin writes down Rosemary's name and adds it to the memory tree as the rest of them are having a pillow fight, and you see him looking at them, and I think he's thinking, I wish I could be like them. They're happy, having a good time, but he really is thinking about Rosemary, and it's really hurting him. In that moment, it was just a heartfelt, touching moment. Just him writing down her name and putting it on the wall for memories. Like, he is never going to forget his sister, whether his parents have brushed it off is one thing. And, even in the closet, he brings up to Louisa that his parents, that's just how his parents were. They kind of, when the tragedy happened with his sister, they just kind of moved on. And Louisa's like, no, you don't got to be like them, Martin. Like, she understands him now a little bit better now that she's met his parents. And, even he was like, yeah, they're a different breed, aren't they? So now I think Louisa is beginning to understand Martin more, in a sense. So that was the recap of episode 9. And now I want to kind of talk about developments and my thoughts. So overall, this episode was a big episode where we learned more about Martin's past in a way. But I don't know if it was my favorite episode in the sense of last week's episode. I enjoyed it very, very much. This week's episode I really loved because we got to see Martin Clunes back on our screens. As a Doc Martin fan, that made my day to be able to see him guest star. So it'll be my favorite episode in the aspect of I got to see Martin Clunes. But as for my favorite episode, episode 8 is going to stay my favorite episode as of right now. So with that being said, let's go back and talk. So we got to see and learn more about Martin Best and his family. We learned that, Robert, his father, and Vanessa, they don't really like to talk about the accident about Rosemary. Don't seem to want to talk about it. And Robert has a gambling problem and is trying to sell Aunt Sarah's house, which technically is his house, but You see Aunt Sarah, we learned that Aunt Sarah had an affair, and that kind of all makes sense now why they wouldn't want their son to stay with her. We got to see Elaine, for once experience somebody not really supporting what she does, and she really doesn't know how to react to that. And she talks to Al about it, and he tries to comfort her. We learned that Al is smarter than what we really knew. He had perfect SAT scores, and Louisa's trying to encourage him to use those to maybe get a career out there, but he seems hesitant. And of course we got to see Martin and Louisa's characters' relationships develop more in the heartfelt moment in the closet. So yeah, overall we learned a lot about this episode, and I feel like I didn't not like this episode. We learned a lot, but like I said, I think episode 8 is still my favorite episode so far. And I still have questions. I learned a little bit more about the whole thing about why he's not allowed to be with Aunt Sarah anymore, why they wouldn't letting him stay there. We learned more about the parents. I want to learn more about this blood phobia thing. And I want to learn more about Rosemary. What happened to Rosemary? I want to know that. I was hoping we'd get those questions answered, but we did not. But if you saw the preview for next week's episode, it's very, very dramatic. Like, a lot is going to be happening. And it said the question we've all been waiting for. So I'm curious to see if maybe that is related to Rosemary. Maybe we'll get that question answered in next week's episode. Time will tell. But yeah, that concludes my reaction video for episode 9 of Best Medicine. I hope you enjoyed watching, and will continue to come back and watch my reaction videos each and every week as I talk all things Best Medicine and recapping each and every episode. And if you did like this video, please be sure to give it a like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you can get notified every time I upload a new reaction video, or video in general. I try to upload these videos every Thursday. Sometimes it's Friday, but I try to upload it every single week, and I have a playlist on my channel where you can check the other videos out. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and I will see you next week. Take care. Now, this is the part of the video where if you are a Doc Martin fan like myself and you're curious what my thoughts are in a Doc Martin fan's perspective, come on, let's talk about it. So, first of all, I was very excited to see Martin Clunes back on our screens. It was a very good treat to see him. I enjoyed watching him, and I think that he portrayed Robert Best very well. I think that he had a little bit of Martin Elliam in him, and you could tell that you can tell that he is a different person compared to Martin Best. He's a little bit more grumpy, where Martin Best has a little bit more caring and compassion to him. You wouldn't see that until you put him and Robert side by side. But yeah, in a way, Robert Best was Martin Elliam. Just the stop talking, whenever the patients are talking and he can't concentrate, and the wanting to do the procedure on the spot. If he knows what he can do, he's going to perform it, or Martin Best was like, hey, no, I think we need to wait for the paramedics. Robert was like Martin Elliam, like, no, we're doing this right now. And so, yeah, I could see that. The blood phobia thing is still a lot in common to the original. So in this week's episode, we see Dr. Martin Best putting blood vials around his house, and when he opens cupboards, he has to look at it, and he immediately becomes nauseous. That is similar to whenever Ruth was trying to help Martin succumb his blood phobia in the original, and was putting things in drawers and stuff, which immediately Martin's like, you need to stop doing that. That's not okay. I don't like you putting things in my house like that. You know, when Ruth was trying to help him. The hair ball guy, the guy that was eating his hair, very similar to the original, you know. In Doc Martin, you have when Aunt Joan was making her house into a Airbnb to make a little bit extra cash when she was financially troubled. She allowed this guy to stay with her, and it turned out he had the same condition where he was eating his hair, ingesting it, similar to our version. And then you have the parents coming to visit and the main reason was to sell the house out from under both Aunt Joan and Aunt Sarah. And in both situations, you know, Martin was willing to help their aunts out. Martin Best just confronted and came out and said to Aunt Sarah, I'm willing to chip in and help you pay for this if that's what you want. Whereas Martin Elliam was a little bit more secretive about it. He sold his flat, but he told them not to say a word to anyone. He didn't want his aunt to know that he had done that. So, and right away we find out that in the original, Martin's father does end up selling the house, and by him selling his flat, he saves the house for Aunt Joan to live in. We do not see in the original if Robert does end up selling the house or not. Maybe time will tell, But it sounds like now that it's been brought up that the whole reason he wants to sell the house is because of his gambling problems, it may or may not happen. But that was similarities. Another similarity was Louisa trying to give her speech, and on our version, she's left the task that the school is going to be shut down and that she needs to tell everyone at the sleep-in that this is the last sleep-in, and she's trying to tell them that they're going to have the school shut down, but they immediately, kids being kids, interrupt her and is like, are we going to do this or not? Finding the hidden mosquito mascot for hide and seek. So she gets cut off, and this is similar to on Doc Martin whenever she decides that she is resigning from being the headmaster to pursue her career in social work or whatever you call it. And she's trying to make that announcement at the race day, the boat racing day, but then the accident happens on the beach and she gets cut off. So she didn't get to finish her resignation, so that was similar. And then another similarity was Louisa's compassion towards Martin. In our version, she's in the closet asking Martin how she can help him succumb this blood phobia. And unlike the original, he actually is all for it, and he's like, please just stay with me. Like, I need you to stay in here with me. And, whereas in the original, Martin Elliam, whenever Louisa asks him if he's okay, he's like, I'm fine, don't worry about it, please shut the door, leave me be. He didn't want anybody to show him love and compassion. He didn't want nothing like that. He's not a person that wants sympathy or empathy, so that's how their characters are a little bit different. But yeah, I think I've covered everything that is similar to the original, things that were tied in. This episode, once again, like the overall plot line had nothing to do with Doc Martin, which I really enjoyed. Once again, it wasn't something that you could predict right away, whereas here and there were little things like the hairball guy or Aunt Sarah's affair. We could kind of see that being tied in with one another, but nothing like to spoil you not being able to watch. So yeah, that is going to conclude my video for today of reacting to Best Medicine Season 1 Episode 9 called Doc Martin. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed watching this week's episode as much as I did. It was just a lovely treat to see Martin Clunes back on our screens. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great day and rest of the week, and I cannot wait to see you next week when we react to episode 10. This next week's episode looks like it's going to be very intense. A lot is going to be happening, and I'm very curious to see what all is going to unfold. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and turn that notification bell on so that you can be reminded whenever I upload another video. And I will see you back here same time next week. Take care.